2 months before my wedding, my car was filled with evidence that I believed I had a future. 3 floral samples rested in cardboard boxes across the back seat. The final tasting menu lay beneath the winery contract. A revised seating plan occupied the passenger seat beside confirmation from the production company that would live-stream the ceremony for our restaurant group's social channels. Miles and I had spent 9 years building Hearth and Vine hospitality together. We had spent 11 months planning the wedding. I was driving back from Napa when he called. "I don't think I'm ready to get married," he said. There was no argument before it. No trembling confession. Only that sentence, delivered while I was stopped at a traffic light with white roses brushing the rear window behind me. I turned down the music. "What happened?" "I don't know." "Do you want to postpone?" "I don't know." "For how long?" "Elena," I said, "I don't know." The light changed. A driver behind me sounded his horn, and I pulled into a grocery store parking lot. Miles had been distracted for weeks, but distraction was normal for him before a launch. He was the public face of Hearth and Vine, chef, founder, television personality, and the man investors trusted to turn a plate of food into a story. I handled the part stories usually omitted: supplier approvals, food safety systems, labor budgets, production schedules, insurance, contracts, the refrigerated trucks that had to arrive whether Miles felt inspired or not. Our newest launch involved a cookbook, a line of prepared meals, and national grocery distribution. I had assumed his distance came from pressure. "Tell me what you need," I said. "Space." "Does that mean a week?" "Does it mean we cancel the wedding?" "I can't answer that right now." "Then tell me where you are." He was silent for several seconds. "Don't look for me." The call ended. When I reached our house in San Francisco, his suitcase was gone. So were several jackets, his passport, and the leather knife roll he took whenever he expected to cook somewhere for more than a day. He had left his wedding suit in the upstairs closet. For the first 48 hours, I believed that meant something. His assistant told me Miles was taking emergency personal leave. Mason, Miles's older brother and our chief financial officer, said he had received the same explanation. The board did not know where Miles was. Neither did his parents, or they claimed they did not. Miles missed a product tasting, 2 investor calls, and the final operations review for the prepared meal launch. I covered the investor calls. I reassigned the tasting. I approved the production schedule after correcting 3 labeling problems that should have reached me a week earlier. Every night, I returned to the house and checked whether his suitcase had come back. It never did. He sent one message during those 3 weeks. "Don't look for me. I need time." I answered once. "I will give you space, but the company and wedding require decisions. Please tell me you are safe." He did not respond. I postponed the dress fitting without canceling it. I asked the winery to hold the date for another week. I told my mother that Miles was exhausted and needed time away from the cameras. I still believed I was protecting a frightened fiancé. I did not understand that Miles had already made his decision. He was waiting for me to discover it after everyone else. 3 weeks after the phone call, I arrived at our flagship restaurant for the national launch of Hearth and Vine at Home. The reception area had been transformed into a press gallery. Shelves displayed our cookbook beside trays of packaged meals. Food writers, grocery executives, investors, and lifestyle reporters moved beneath warm pendant lights, while staff carried glasses of sparkling wine through the room. I had coordinated every detail. I had approved the guest list, packaging displays, tasting sequence, kitchen inspections, refrigeration logs, and media schedule. No one had told me Miles would attend. I saw him before he saw me. He stood near the entrance to the dining room wearing the navy suit I had sent for tailoring that spring. One hand rested on the handle of a black infant stroller. Beside him stood Sienna Cole. Sienna had been the executive pastry chef at our flagship restaurant. 6 months earlier, she had requested leave because of a family medical crisis. Her leave had been extended twice. Human Resources had told me she needed privacy, and I had personally approved continued health coverage beyond the period required by company policy. Now she wore a cream dress and held a baby against her shoulder. The child could not have been more than a few weeks old. Miles leaned toward Sienna and adjusted the blanket beneath the baby's chin with the natural familiarity of someone who had done it many times before. The first employee to notice me was a server near the host stand. Her expression changed. Then the room changed with her. Conversations weakened. A publicist lowered her tablet. 2 kitchen managers looked away. Mason, standing near the product display, stopped speaking in the middle of a sentence. Too many people recognized the scene before I did. That was how I knew parts of the truth had been circulating without me. Miles finally looked up. Elena. He said my name as though I had arrived at the wrong event. I crossed the reception area. Sienna held the child more tightly, but did not step away from him. Miles kept one hand on the stroller. There were cameras 10 feet from us. I did not care. Whose baby is he? Miles glanced toward the reporters. Elena, not here. Whose baby? Sienna looked at him, waiting. Miles lowered his voice. Mine. No one moved. The baby made a small sound against Sienna's shoulder. What is his name? I asked. Theo, Miles said. The answer came too easily. He had said that name before. He had introduced the child to other people. He had probably held him in rooms where no one needed to ask who he was. I looked at Sienna. When was he born? 5 weeks ago, she said. 5 weeks. While I was approving her extended medical leave, she had been preparing to give birth. While I was in Napa choosing flowers, Miles had been with his newborn son. While I was sleeping alone in the house where we planned to raise a family, he had already formed one somewhere else. I did not scream. I did not throw a glass, strike either of them, or ask a room full of employees to choose between us. I removed my event badge and placed it on the reception desk. We need to speak privately. Miles led me into the conference room beside the test kitchen. Sienna followed with Theo until I stopped at the door. This conversation is between Miles and me. She's part of it, he said. Then you can explain yourself in front of her. We entered together. Through the glass wall, I could see staff attempting to restart the event. Mason began directing the publicists away from the conference room. Miles closed the blinds. I didn't plan for this to happen, he said. You had approximately 9 months to plan how to tell me. It wasn't that simple. It became simple when you brought them to a company launch I organized. Sienna was invited. By whom? I invited her. Then you intended me to see them. I intended to stop hiding. You told me not to look for you. Because I needed time to figure out how to handle this without destroying everything. I looked at the woman whose leave I had approved and the man I was supposed to marry in 5 weeks. You decided the best way to avoid destroying everything was to let me walk into a room where the employees already knew. Sienna shifted Theo to her other shoulder. We weren't trying to humiliate you. Then one of you should have told me before the photographers arrived. Miles pressed both hands against the table. Our relationship has been over for a long time. You ordered wedding invitations with me 6 weeks ago. That doesn't mean we were happy. You approved the Napa contract. You approved it. After you chose the venue with me. His face tightened. This is what I mean. What? Every conversation becomes a record with you. A date, an approval, a contract. Even now, you're talking like this is a board review. You introduced your baby to our employees before you told your fiancé he existed. Precision is the only thing keeping this conversation from becoming what it deserves to be. Miles walked toward the window and stopped before the closed blinds. With you, I never leave work, he said. I go home and you ask about labor costs. We have dinner and you ask whether the new supplier passed inspection. We take a weekend away and you bring a contract. Because half the contracts you promise on television only work if someone reads them. That is exactly it. You always have to manage everything. I managed the company we built. You managed me. Sienna touched his arm. The gesture was quiet, practiced, and intimate. Miles looked at her before continuing. Sienna doesn't ask for quarterly sales during dinner. She doesn't make every mistake feel like a compliance failure. With her, life feels like life. And with me, it feels like I'm still at the office. The words should have hurt because they were cruel. They hurt more because I could identify every compromise beneath them. Miles could remain spontaneous because I maintained the schedule. He could reject budgets in front of cameras because I renegotiated them afterward. He could describe Hearth and Vine as a family because I wrote the policies that kept employees paid when his instincts exceeded our cash flow. He experienced my work as pressure because it prevented his promises from collapsing. Sienna kissed the top of Theo's head. Miles watched her. "This changed me," he said. Holding him made me understand what I've been missing. I knew what was coming before he said it. "I've always wanted children." He spoke as though he were finally admitting a sacrifice. Sienna lowered her eyes. Miles continued. "I stayed for 9 years, Elena. I tried not to make you feel guilty. I told my parents it didn't matter. But I can't spend the rest of my life pretending I don't want to be a father." His parents had made the same implication for 2 years. His mother sent me articles about fertility diets. His father once joked at Christmas that a successful woman should learn there were deadlines no board could extend. Miles always appeared uncomfortable when they spoke that way. He never corrected them. I had allowed the Bennett family, not their real names? No, avoid. I had allowed his family to believe the problem was mine. Now he was using the protection I had given him as evidence of his loyalty. 2 years earlier, we had visited a reproductive clinic together. Miles provided the required sample, but skipped the results consultation because a morning television segment offered him an exclusive cooking demonstration. He told me to take notes. I sat alone in the physician's office while she reviewed the tests. My results were largely normal for my age. Nothing guaranteed an easy pregnancy, but there was no clear female factor condition preventing natural conception. Miles's results showed severe male factor infertility. His count, motility, and morphology were all far below the expected range. Natural conception was possible in theory, but extremely unlikely. The doctor recommended repeat testing and a specialist consultation before we made decisions. I left with 2 printed reports in a sealed folder. That week, Miles was preparing for the launch of his first national television series. His father had recently mocked a rival chef's inability to have children during a private dinner. Investors were evaluating whether Miles could become the permanent face of our growing company. I imagined what the truth would do to him. Not medically. Personally. I imagined his father's contempt, the gossip, the questions from entertainment reporters, and the humiliation Miles would feel if the information escaped during the launch. When he came home, he asked, "How bad is it?" I said, "The problem is mine." He hugged me for a long time. He told me it did not change how he loved me. He never asked to see the reports. 3 months later, I tried to reopen the conversation. He had a shoot. The next time, he was preparing for financing. Then we were expanding into grocery distribution. There was always a reason to delay the truth. I told myself I was waiting for a safer moment. In reality, I had decided that protecting his self-image was easier than asking him to behave like an adult. That was not healthy love. It was management. Now a 5-week-old baby rested against Sienna's shoulder, and the man whose natural fertility had been described as extremely unlikely was telling me that my supposed infertility justified his betrayal. I could have exposed him in that conference room. I did not. Theo's paternity was not something I could determine from an old medical report. Extremely unlikely did not mean impossible, and the child was not responsible for the lies surrounding his birth. I looked at Miles. "How long?" He glanced at Sienna. "Almost a year." That placed the beginning of their affair before our engagement party. Before Sienna requested leave. Before Miles and I paid the deposit on the winery. You were building another family while I planned our wedding. I didn't know what I wanted. You knew enough to tell me not to look for you. I was trying to protect Theo. No. You were protecting the life you wanted from the woman, still maintaining the life you already had. He reached toward me. "Elena, we can handle this privately." I removed my engagement ring. For a moment, I remembered Miles placing it on my hand in the empty flagship dining room after closing. He had said every important thing in his life existed because I had believed in him before anyone else did. I placed the ring on the conference table. "Cancel the wedding," I said. "Let the lawyers handle the rest. You don't have to make decisions today. You introduced me to your son at my product launch. You made the decision before I entered the building." I left them in the conference room. The event continued without me. By the following morning, I had retained an attorney and an independent forensic accountant. Hearth and Vine had begun as Miles's first restaurant, but I had invested savings, deferred salary, and 11 years of labor into the group. After several financing rounds and employee equity grants, I still owned approximately 22%. The separation took multiple negotiations. I did not demand ownership of Miles's name or image. He did not receive my shares for free. After debt, investor preferences, and pending expansion costs were calculated, we reached a $3.6 million repurchase agreement. Part would be paid at closing. The remainder would be paid in installments secured by company assets. I resigned as Chief Operating Officer, Head of Food Safety, Supplier Approval Authority, and final signatory for product launches. I prepared formal transition documents. I did not delete supplier files, take customer lists, interfere with restaurant systems, encourage employees to resign, or contact retailers to damage the launch. I left every record where it belonged. What I stopped providing was myself. Miles called 3 days after my resignation. "This is moving too fast," he said. "You had almost a year. The company still needs continuity. Then create it. You can stay through the national rollout. We don't have to work together directly. You want me to operate the company while Sienna stands beside you as its new family. She isn't replacing you professionally." She attended a leadership meeting this morning. Silence. Mason had informed the board that Sienna would advise on product development and consumer branding. As Chief Financial Officer and Miles's older brother, he supported the arrangement. "Sienna understands the food," Miles said. "She was a pastry chef in one restaurant. So were you once." "I was never a pastry chef." "That's not the point." "No. The point is that you still believe I will remain behind the curtain, preventing your decisions from becoming consequences." He exhaled. "You built this company. You're not going to abandon it." "I built this place," I said. "That's why I know exactly when it's time to stop holding it up." For the next month, the numbers appeared to prove him right. Sales rose after the launch. Miles and Sienna appeared together in interviews with Theo, presenting Hearth and Vine at Home as a brand inspired by family. Viewers loved the story of the celebrity chef whose unexpected child changed the way he thought about feeding people. Inside the company, Mason approved faster expansion. Supplier reviews were shortened. Promotions increased. A new prepared meal contractor, Northline Provisions, offered prices 27% below our existing supplier. When the quality team questioned Northline's inconsistent records, Mason overruled them. Sienna supported eliminating some batch tracking requirements because she believed the packaging contained too many codes that confused customers. Miles told reporters the company had been freed from an era of excessive caution. Then a wedding invitation arrived. The date was the one printed on my canceled invitations. The venue was the Napa winery I had selected. The floral design was built from my 3 samples. The dinner menu included the dishes from my final tasting. The same production company would live stream the ceremony. Sienna had taken my wedding almost as completely as she had taken my place at the launch. A handwritten card was enclosed. "Come watch Miles finally get the family he always wanted." I placed the invitation in the folder with the fertility reports. 2 weeks before the wedding, I left my attorney's office after signing the final share transfer documents. Across the street stood a hotel used by visiting executives and production crews. I was waiting for the pedestrian light when Sienna emerged through the revolving doors. She was not carrying Theo. Mason followed her. He placed one hand against her back as they stopped beneath the hotel awning. At first, I thought they were saying goodbye. Then Sienna lifted her face. Mason did not embrace her like a future brother-in-law. He kissed her. Before Sienna became my replacement, she had already been my future brother-in-law's secret. I watched Mason kiss Sienna for less than 5 seconds. It was long enough to change the meaning of the last year. They separated beneath the hotel awning before the pedestrian light turned green. Mason looked toward the street, and I stepped behind a delivery van before he could see me. I did not cross the road. I did not follow either of them. I called my attorney. "I need to know whether I saw an affair," I said, "or part of something affecting the company whose shares I just sold." By the following afternoon, I had retained a licensed investigator through her firm. Her instructions were narrow. She could document conduct visible in public places, examine public corporate registrations, review lawfully accessible social media records, and verify commercial relationships through government filings and other legitimate sources. She could not enter private property, access accounts, obtain protected medical information, impersonate anyone, or turn uncertainty about Theo into an excuse to invade a child's life. I was no longer trying to save my engagement. I needed to understand whether the man controlling Hearth and Vine's finances had concealed a relationship with an employee while approving contracts connected to her. The first report arrived 4 days later. Mason had known Sienna before she joined the company. 3 years earlier, they had appeared together in photographs from a charity culinary event in Los Angeles. In one image, his hand rested against her waist. An archived comment beneath another called them the couple who disappeared before dessert. At the time, Mason had already been married to Vanessa for 7 years. Additional public records showed repeated overlaps between Mason's business travel and Sienna's movements. Hotel entrances, restaurant photographs, parking records attached to reimbursed company travel, and public event images placed them in the same cities on dates that had nothing to do with Hearth and Vine. Mason had also recommended Sienna for her original position. Her hiring file described her as a candidate sourced through an executive referral. The name of the executive had been omitted from the board packet. Internal correspondence preserved in my transition archive identified him. Mason Carter. The investigator located an older social media account Sienna had stopped using after joining the company. Several posts referred to a married man who kept promising that, after the next family obligation, they would stop hiding. One caption was dated the week after Mason and Vanessa's 10th wedding anniversary. He says leaving takes time. I'm starting to think time is what he intends to give me instead. The photographs never showed his full face. A watch, a wedding ring, and a reflection in a restaurant window were enough to identify him when compared with public images. Mason had not left Vanessa. Months later, Sienna began working with Miles. The timeline did not show a clean ending followed by a new relationship. It showed an overlap. During Sienna's pregnancy, Mason and Sienna met repeatedly in public places. The investigator documented 4 occasions after Miles claimed his own affair with Sienna had begun. One meeting occurred 2 days before Sienna requested extended leave. Another occurred outside the clinic building where she received prenatal care, although no attempt was made to access medical records. The hotel kiss I witnessed was not a reunion after years apart. It was the latest visible part of an ongoing relationship. Then the investigation reached Northline Provisions. Northline had become Hearth and Vine's primary low-cost supplier after I resigned. Its prices were significantly below the established market for nut pastes, sauces, frozen dessert bases, and several ingredients used in children's meals. Mason had approved a substantial advance payment arrangement despite Northline's short operating history. The company's public registration identified a commercial agent rather than an individual owner. The listed mailing address belonged to a business services office used by dozens of companies. But a financing statement filed 6 months earlier named Redwood Table Ventures as Northline's secured lender. Redwood Table Ventures was controlled by a trust administered through Mason's investment company. A second filing showed that Mason's company held the right to acquire a controlling interest in Northline if certain revenue targets were met. Northline was not merely a supplier he had discovered. It was a business from which he could profit. Sienna had recommended Northline during a product meeting. Mason approved the contract. Miles promoted the savings. None of them disclosed Mason's interest to the board. What appeared to be a private betrayal and what appeared to be aggressive cost reduction were connected by the same 2 people. I sent the investigators' report to Miles. I attached the corporate filings, dated photographs, archived posts, and an explanation of the link between Northline and Mason's investment company. My message contained one sentence. Read this before you marry her. Miles called 7 minutes later. You had Sienna followed? I hired a licensed investigator to verify public activity and commercial records. You followed the mother of my child. No one approached Theo or entered private property. This is obsessive, Elena. Your brother has an undisclosed financial interest in the supplier he approved. This is about Sienna, not Northline. It is about both. You got your buyout. You left the company. You said the lawyers would handle everything, and now you're investigating my fiancé. Ask Mason whether he controlled Redwood Table Ventures when Northline received its financing. I'm not interrogating my brother because you found documents you don't understand. I understand beneficial interests and related party transactions. You understand how to turn everything into an audit. I closed my eyes. Even now, evidence became another personality defect. Ask Sienna when her relationship with Mason ended. She told me they had a brief history before we were together. The photographs show them meeting during her pregnancy. Mason helped her because I couldn't be there publicly. And the hotel? Miles paused. Sienna said he was upset after Vanessa confronted him about company expenses. She was trying to calm him down. By kissing him? You saw a moment from across the street. I sent you more than one moment. You sent me a story you paid someone to build. I sent you dates. His voice changed. You cannot accept that I chose her. This is not about being chosen. It has always been about that. You thought the company made you indispensable. Then Sienna came in, gave me the family you couldn't, and proved life continued without you. The old lie returned as a weapon. I looked toward the folder containing our fertility reports. You should read what I sent. I have read enough. No, Miles. You have spent years letting other people read difficult things for you. He hung up. An hour later, Sienna sent me a message. If you've really moved on, come watch us get married. I read it twice. She believed my attendance would prove I still wanted Miles. She did not understand that I had already lost the version of him I wanted. The man preparing to marry her had been shown evidence involving his brother, his child, and his company. He had chosen not to examine it. I replied, I'll be there. I did not plan to interrupt the ceremony. Before accepting the invitation, I sent the same materials to Hearth and Vine's independent directors and general counsel. I identified the potential conflict involving Northline and requested that they preserve supplier approval, payment, and traceability records. I also sent the personal portion to Vanessa. She was not only Mason's wife. She was a non-executive director of Hearth and Vine and the person whose signature appeared on several financing authorizations Mason had prepared. I included no demand. I did not ask the board to confront Mason at the wedding. I did not tell Vanessa how or when to address her husband. I gave each person information relevant to their own legal and financial exposure. What they did with it belonged to them. The wedding took place at the Napa Winery on the original date. By then, Hearth and Vine had renamed its prepared meal line Carter at Home. The ceremony would also serve as the national launch of a campaign called Family Table. The transformation was obvious. Miles had turned his marriage into a brand event. I arrived 10 minutes before the ceremony and sat in the last row. The white floral arch came from the design I had approved. Lanterns hung along the same vineyard path I had walked with the planner. The long dinner tables used my seating layout. The printed menu contained the dishes from my final tasting. The livestream cameras stood where I had instructed the production company to place them. Even the sponsor display followed the layout in my event file. Sienna had not simply taken my date and venue. She was walking into a wedding assembled from decisions I had already made. Miles saw me before the music began. He approached while the guests were still taking their seats. His suit was the one selected for our ceremony. You came. You invited me. Sienna invited you. Then thank her. He studied my face as though looking for evidence of regret. If you're here to create a scene, leave now. I didn't bring a microphone. I know how you operate. You wait until everyone is watching, then produce a document and call it responsibility. You're describing the event you planned. His jaw tightened. This day is about my family. I know. Then don't punish Theo because you're angry with me. I have never blamed Theo for anything. Good. Sit quietly, watch the ceremony, and maybe you'll finally understand that leaving was the right decision. He walked back toward the altar believing he had won something. The ceremony proceeded without interruption. Sienna entered beneath the white flowers holding a small bouquet based on one of the 3 samples still boxed in my former house. Theo was carried down the aisle by Miles's mother. Miles and Sienna exchanged vows. They signed the marriage documents. Guests applauded when they kissed. I remained in my seat. Whatever truth waited behind Theo's birth, the marriage itself was complete. After the ceremony, the event shifted into the family table launch. Servers poured wine while the live stream host introduced executives, sponsors, and members of the Carter family. Vanessa was scheduled to lead the brand presentation. She stood near the stage in a dark green dress, holding the same cards she had used during rehearsals. Mason remained beside the screen as chief financial officer. He had not looked at her once since I arrived. Miles took the microphone first. He held Theo against his chest while Sienna stood beside him. "This year taught me that food is not about systems," he said. "It is about the people waiting for you at home." The audience applauded. He continued. "For a long time, I confused control with care. Some people can turn every dinner into a performance review." Heads turned toward the final row. Miles did not say my name. He did not need to. "Sienna taught me that home should feel simple," he said. "She reminded me that the best meals are made with love, not spreadsheets." Several guests laughed softly. 9 years of labor had become a joke about paperwork. I had built the safety systems, supplier networks, budgets, and employee procedures that allowed Miles to stand on a vineyard stage and describe food as simple. He had never experienced the complexity because I carried it before it reached him. Sienna met my eyes over Theo's head. Then she smiled. Vanessa walked onto the stage when Miles finished. The livestream host announced her as Hearth and Vine's non-executive director and the matriarch behind the family table campaign. Vanessa reached the microphone. She looked at the prepared script. Then she set it down. "I was supposed to introduce a film about trust," she said. "Before we sell trust to families across the country, mine needs to answer for what it has done with theirs." Mason moved toward her. "Vanessa." She raised one hand. The livestream cameras continued recording. "Pause the campaign film," she told the production director. "Play the verified file my attorney delivered this morning." The screen behind her went black. Mason reached for the control station, but 2 independent directors stepped between him and the technician. A 40-second timeline began. There was no narration. Only dates, images, and public records reviewed by Vanessa's attorneys. Mason and Sienna entering a hotel during a business trip he had described to Vanessa as a lender meeting. Mason and Sienna kissing in a parking structure. Mason carrying Theo's infant seat into a private dining room while Miles was filming in New York. Photographs of meetings during Sienna's pregnancy. The registration for Redwood Table Ventures. Northline's financing statement. The matching address connected to Mason's investment company. The timeline ended with the date Mason approved Northline's advance payment. No title accused Mason of fathering Theo. No slide declared the child's identity. Vanessa turned toward her husband. "How long have you been using this family to hide what belongs to you?" The vineyard became silent. Mason took the microphone from its stand. "These photographs are being misrepresented." "Which one?" Vanessa asked. "The hotel, the kiss, the baby, or the company you forgot to disclose?" "Sienna and I were close years ago. I helped her during a difficult pregnancy. You told me you were in Chicago negotiating a credit facility." "I was in Chicago." "You charged the flight to Hearth and Vine and spent the night with her in Napa." Mason looked toward the cameras. "This is a private marital issue. The financing documents carrying my signature are not private." Sienna stepped forward. "Mason was helping me because I had no one else." Miles stared at her. "You had me. I couldn't ask you for everything." "What was he helping you with?" "The pregnancy. Appointments. Money." "I was scared." Miles's face changed. "Did you sleep with my brother?" Sienna looked at Mason. Mason looked toward the production team. Neither answered. "Did you sleep with him while you were pregnant?" "Miles, this isn't the place." He laughed once, without humor. "You brought my son to a wedding broadcast as a national family campaign. Where's the place?" Sienna began crying. She said Mason had manipulated her. Mason said Sienna had misunderstood their relationship. Vanessa asked why Northline's profits flowed toward a company he controlled. Miles demanded to know why Mason had held Theo in secret. The livestream director finally cut the official feed. Guests had already been recording on their phones. Clips began appearing online before the first dinner course was served. I left while the Carter family argued beneath the floral arch I had designed. Reporters followed me toward the parking area. One asked whether I believed Theo was Mason's child. "The child is innocent," I said. "The adults need to answer for themselves." I made no other statement. Miles and Sienna were legally married. They did not leave the winery together. By midnight, the family table launch had become a scandal. The public wanted to know why Hearth and Vine's chief financial officer had concealed a relationship with the new bride. Business reporters found Northline's filings and began asking why a related party supplier had not been disclosed. Comment sections asked whether Theo was Miles's son or Mason's. Sponsors demanded explanations. The board announced an independent investigation. 2 days after the wedding, the personal scandal became secondary. A mother in Oregon posted an independent laboratory report for a Carter at-home meal labeled nut-free children's creamy pasta. Her 9-year-old daughter had developed hives, swelling, and breathing difficulty after eating half the meal. She received emergency treatment and recovered. The laboratory detected cashew protein. Within 24 hours, additional families reported allergic reactions. 4 children were treated in hospitals. No one died, but the absence of a death did not make the failures acceptable. Hearth and Vine recalled approximately 68,000 meal boxes. National grocery and delivery platforms suspended Carter at-home products. Retail partners demanded a complete supply chain audit. State regulators requested allergen control, production, and distribution records. The board's preliminary investigation found that Northline lacked complete allergen separation documentation. Some ingredients came from a processing facility never approved under Hearth and Vine's original system. Traceability numbers had been reused across multiple lots. Records could not establish which cashew-based dessert ingredients had shared equipment with components used in the children's pasta sauce. The safeguards had once existed. My original supplier process required 2 independent reviews for high-risk allergens. A food safety specialist verified the production facility, and an operations approver matched every lot number to the approved source before release. Sienna had removed the second review from the launch workflow because she called it repetitive. Mason approved the revised process and Northline's advance payment. Miles authorized national distribution. In a promotional interview, he claimed he had personally inspected every ingredient. The access logs showed he had never opened Northline's allergen report. The crisis had not appeared because I left. It appeared because Miles, Sienna, and Mason had deliberately removed systems they considered slow, expensive, and unnecessarily cautious. Hearth and Vine's general counsel contacted me and asked whether I possessed separate supplier records. All company materials remained in the operations archive when I resigned, I said. The pre-Northline review templates should be in the controlled compliance directory. Can you come back and help us reconstruct the approval history? I can confirm where my records were stored. I will not access company systems or assume responsibility for decisions made after my resignation without an independent agreement. I provided no private files because I had taken none. I did not step back into the chief operating role because the people who removed the safeguards had finally discovered why they existed. 8 days after the wedding, Miles came to my new office. Brooks Food and Brand Systems occupied 2 rooms above a printing business. Only 2 desks had been assembled. 3 lamps remained in unopened boxes. A temporary sign bearing the company name leaned against the wall because the mounting hardware had not arrived. Miles stood in the doorway wearing the same coat he had worn to the last investor meeting we attended together. In 1 week, he seemed to have aged years. "The company needs you," he said. He had left me because I made his life feel like work. Now every part of his life was collapsing, and he had come back looking for the woman who used to work through it. "The company needs you," Miles said. He stood inside my unfinished office as though the sentence entitled him to enter. I did not offer him the second chair. It was still wrapped in protective plastic, and I had no intention of preparing another place for him. "What does the company need from me?" He seemed relieved that I had not immediately refused. "We need the original supplier team. You know who will answer your calls. The board needs a complete recall plan, and the retailers want proof that our old controls worked. They did work. That's why you need to say so publicly. I no longer speak for Hearth and Vine. You built the system. And you removed it. Sienna and Mason removed parts of it. I didn't know what they were doing. You appointed them. Mason was already chief financial officer. You allowed him to control procurement. You gave Sienna authority she was not qualified to hold. You signed the national launch. I'm a chef, Elena. I don't understand supplier audits the way you do. You understood enough to take the applause. You only stopped understanding when the liability arrived. Miles looked around the nearly empty room. I came here to ask for help, not to fight. You asked me to tell the public you had no role in decisions carrying your signature. I want you to explain that I wasn't involved in Northline. You appeared in advertisements saying you personally inspected every ingredient. That was marketing language. For children were treated in hospitals because your company sold an allergen as a nut-free meal. Marketing does not become imaginary when the claim turns out to be false. He sat on the edge of the wrapped chair without asking. The board is removing Mason. Sienna is already locked out of the systems. If you return for 90 days, we can stabilize the restaurants and separate the core business from Carter at home. I am not a shareholder, officer, or employee. We'll pay you. You paid me for the shares and compensation I had already earned. That did not purchase emergency access to me for the rest of your career. His face tightened. I could see the moment he stopped speaking as a chief executive and returned to the man who had once expected me to repair every problem before it reached him. Sienna and I are separated, he said. That has nothing to do with the recall. It has something to do with us. There is no us. I know you're angry. I am not refusing because I'm angry. I'm refusing because returning would make me responsible for decisions I did not make and no longer had the authority to prevent. He looked down at his hands. I'm filing for custody of Theo. You have been married for 8 days. I'm listed as his father. I've raised him since he was born. Then get legal advice and protect the child. Don't use him to restart this conversation. Miles stood. You wanted a family. The sentence made me understand where he was going. If Theo is mine, I'm not abandoning him because of what Sienna did, he said. You cared about him even after everything. We could take this slowly. You and I already know how to build a life together. You are asking me to help you raise the child you introduced as proof that another woman could give you what I couldn't. I'm saying something good could come out of this. You're offering yourself and a baby as compensation. That isn't what I mean. It is exactly what you mean. You lost the woman who made life feel easy, the company is failing, and now you want the woman who made failure disappear. I loved you. You loved being protected by me. He stepped closer. Theo is innocent. I know. That is why you should stop presenting him as a solution to adult consequences. Miles studied my face. You don't believe he's mine. I opened the filing cabinet beside my desk and removed the folder I had carried out of the fertility clinic 2 years earlier. Did you ever read our test results? You told me what they said. That wasn't my question. His eyes moved to the folder. No. You never asked for a copy? I trusted you. You delegated the truth to me. I placed the reports on the desk. Miles read the first page standing up. My results showed no major abnormality. The physician had written that further evaluation might be appropriate, but there was no identified female factor condition explaining our difficulty conceiving. He turned to his report. Severe male factor infertility. Very low count. Poor motility. Abnormal morphology. Natural conception considered highly unlikely. Repeat testing and specialist consultation recommended. Miles read the page twice. Then he looked at me. You lied. Yes. The answer stopped him. I could have defended myself by listing every reason I had believed the lie was compassionate. Instead, I made myself say what was true. I had no right to decide when another adult was capable of facing his own medical information. You let me believe you couldn't have children. I did. My parents blamed you. I know. You sat there while they blamed you. I thought I was protecting you. From what? Your father's cruelty. The press. Your fear that infertility would make you less masculine. I was afraid you would fall apart before the television launch, and I believed I could carry the humiliation until there was a better time. There was never a better time? I tried to reopen the conversation. You postponed it for filming, financing, and expansion. Eventually, I stopped trying. You should have told me. Yes. He appeared almost disappointed that I would not argue. What you did was sick. It was unhealthy. I confused protecting you with loving you. I made myself responsible for your emotions and then called that responsibility devotion. His voice rose. If I had known, none of this would have happened. You would not have slept with Sienna? I would have known Theo might not be mine. That is not the same answer. You lied about the central problem in our relationship. And you carried on an affair for almost a year, canceled our wedding after your child was born, then used the diagnosis you never read to humiliate me in front of another woman. I thought it was true. You never bothered to check. He closed the folder. I was wrong to carry the truth for you, I said. You were wrong to build your betrayal on a truth you never bothered to check. Miles sat down again. For the first time since entering the office, he looked frightened rather than desperate. The report says highly unlikely. Not impossible. That is correct. So Theo could still be mine. Yes. I did not tell him what conclusion to reach. A fertility report was not a paternity test. Repeat the examination, I said. Then get the DNA test. Are you going to release this? No. You could prove to everyone that I blamed you for my own problem. I am not publishing your medical records. I showed them to you because you were preparing to make decisions about a child while refusing to examine the facts. He took a photograph of the clinic's contact information and left the reports on my desk. At the door, he turned back. If the company fails, thousands of people lose their jobs. Then cooperate with the board, the recall team, and the investigators. You could stop that. No. I could help manage it. That is what you keep confusing with prevention. Miles left without mentioning the company again. His repeat fertility testing produced essentially the same result as the first. The paternity issue entered a formal family law process after he challenged Sienna's account and requested legal recognition of his rights to Theo. Because Miles had publicly acknowledged the child and had acted as his father, the attorneys handled the testing through documented procedures rather than private kits or leaked samples. The first result excluded Miles as Theo's biological father. Sienna initially claimed the test must have been wrong. A second accredited test confirmed it. Miles was not Theo's biological father. That result did not automatically identify anyone else. Sienna had to disclose other possible fathers as part of the case. She admitted that her relationship with Mason had continued during the period when Theo was conceived. Mason resisted testing until the court required it. The final result identified him as Theo's biological father. Miles had canceled our wedding to raise his brother's child. Theo was not his son. He was his nephew. Sienna eventually acknowledged that she had never been certain which brother was the father. Miles was publicly available, emotionally vulnerable, and eager to believe the child represented the family he had been denied. Mason was married and had already broken promises to leave Vanessa. Sienna chose certainty where biology had given her none. Mason knew there was a possibility Theo was his. He remained silent while Miles acknowledged the child, ended our engagement, and married Sienna. Miles sent me the result in a message. Theo isn't mine. He's Mason's. I looked at the words for a long time. Then I replied, I'm sorry for Theo. The rest belongs to the adults who created it. I ended the conversation. The same month, Hearth and Vine's special committee completed its initial Northline investigation. Mason had used his authority as chief financial officer to move the supplier through approval. He arranged advance payments, approved invoices above the value of documented deliveries, and concealed his financial interest in Northline through Redwood Table Ventures. A portion of Northline's profits flowed into entities he controlled. Sienna had promoted the supplier, participated in removing the second allergen review, and described Northline's products as fully vetted when required plant inspections had never occurred. She also approved the simplified traceability codes that later prevented the recall team from identifying affected lots quickly. Miles had not participated directly in Mason's transfer of funds. That did not make him uninvolved. He authorized the shortened approval process, approved the national rollout, and allowed Sienna to influence food safety procedures beyond her qualifications. He then told the public he had personally inspected ingredients whose reports he had never opened. His role was not financial theft. It was executive failure and serious misrepresentation. The recall expanded while the investigation continued. Hearth and Vine paid medical claims, refunds, retailer penalties, laboratory costs, and legal fees. Additional families received compensation through a supervised claims process. The company sold Carter at Home to a larger food manufacturer that agreed to rebuild the product line under independent safety controls. 4 of Hearth and Vine's 14 restaurants closed. Several sponsors and licensing partners ended their contracts. Miles resigned as chief executive and withdrew from daily management. He retained part of his ownership and continued to receive income from older intellectual property, but he no longer controlled the company. Mason was removed as chief financial officer. Civil, regulatory, and financial investigations continued. Whether any conduct would result in criminal charges depended on evidence and prosecutors, not on the anger of people watching the scandal online. Sienna lost her company position and faced claims connected to procurement representations and the altered review process. Vanessa filed for divorce. Miles and Sienna began their own divorce proceedings. Theo's custody, support, and legal parentage were handled through family court. He was not a prize returned to the correct man after a laboratory result. He was an infant whose stability had to matter more than the humiliation of the adults around him. Hearth and Vine did not disappear overnight. Mason, Sienna, and Miles did not lose every dollar or walk directly from the wedding into prison. They lost something more relevant. They lost the authority to keep using public trust, family loyalty, and my labor to hide their decisions. I incorporated Brooks Food and Brand Systems the week after Miles visited my office. The name felt strange on the first contract. Not because Brooks was unfamiliar. It was my name. It felt strange because I had spent almost a decade allowing my work to appear beneath someone else's story. My firm served emerging food brands, restaurant groups, e-commerce companies, and businesses preparing for national retail distribution. We built supplier approval systems, allergen controls, batch traceability programs, recall procedures, and crisis plans. I did not promise clients that risk could be eliminated. I promised that warning signs would not be ignored simply because acknowledging them was inconvenient. In the first quarter, I signed 3 clients. One was a frozen meal startup preparing for its first regional grocery launch. Another was a 6-location restaurant group whose owner admitted during our first meeting that she had no idea how her suppliers documented allergens. The third was a family bakery expanding into online shipping. By the third quarter, we served 9 clients and employed 4 people. We were not famous. I did not become a billionaire, purchase Hearth and Vine, or inherit a national corporation. Some months were profitable. Some were not. I reviewed rent, payroll, and insurance with the same attention I once gave the restaurant group. The difference was visible at the bottom of every proposal. Brooks Food and Brand Systems. Prepared by Elena Brooks. The systems carried my name because the responsibility did too. 1 year after the wedding, Miles asked to meet. We chose a quiet cafe with no connection to Hearth and Vine. He looked healthier than he had during the recall, but smaller without cameras, staff, or a kitchen arranged around him. I was wrong about you, he said. That covers a large area. I thought your caution meant you didn't trust me. I thought every question was criticism. Sometimes it was. I know. But most of the time, you were keeping things from falling apart. I waited. He told me he had confused Sienna's lack of boundaries with freedom. She did not ask difficult questions because she benefited from the decisions he avoided examining. He admitted that he had never understood how Hearth and Vine operated. He understood recipes, cameras, and customers. I had turned those abilities into a business that looked responsible. I lost more than the company, he said. I lost the person who believed in me before any of it existed. You lost her before the wedding. I know. He looked down at his coffee. We had 8 good years before everything went wrong. 8 years explain why leaving hurt, I said. They don't give you a claim on the rest of my life. Is there really no possibility? You don't miss me. You miss the woman who made your talent look responsible. That isn't all you were to me. No. But it is the part you came looking for when your life collapsed. He asked whether I had forgiven him. I told him forgiveness was not an invitation. We left separately. There was no new man waiting outside for me. My life did not need another relationship to prove it had improved. I ate dinner while the food was still warm. I stopped checking sales figures at midnight. I went hiking with my sister on Wednesdays when my schedule allowed it. I attended medical appointments instead of postponing them for launches. I chose clients whose work I believed in. When the permanent sign was finally installed outside my office, I stood across the hallway and looked at my name on the door. For 8 years, I thought love meant catching every plate before it fell. Then I learned that some people only notice your hands after you finally let go.